Well, aloha and good morning. Thank you so much for joining us here on Spotlight Hawaii. I'm Ryan Kalesuji, joined by Yanji Denise. And Yanji, we have a guest who is always popular on our show this morning to kick off this new month.
That's right. We have Lieutenant Governor Josh Green joining us live from his office at the Capitol. The Lieutenant Governor shared with us earlier this morning some great numbers to report. So let's get to the good news. Good morning. Let's start with the numbers. Where are we on vaccinations? And of course, we've got some big developments over the weekend about Johnson & Johnson.
Yeah, actually, lots of good news. And thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Yunji, for welcoming me. 356,843 shots have been delivered. That's an increase over the weekend of 19,942 vaccinations. So that's helpful. And we'll reflect on how this is decreasing our numbers significantly now. Also, we're going to get a lot of vaccine in this week. We're going to get 55,380 doses of Pfizer and Moderna. And I'm sure we'll touch on this, it looks like 11,000 doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine will arrive, which require only one shot. We've now gotten up to 14.4% of our state receiving a vaccine, and we're moving forward really well. This is also reflected in our overall state numbers. Today's count is just 29 cases statewide, of which we're seeing finally those numbers drop on Maui down to 8 on Maui and 17 on Oahu. The positivity rate continues to go down. That's 1.19% statewide. So we're seeing a very good overall response to the vaccine and to people's excellent behavior as far as, being careful. And finally, I just mentioned we have only 630 active cases in our state, which is also very low compared to where we were 2 months ago.
So when we're looking at some of these vaccine numbers specifically, we know that there has been a demand and things were put on hold because of the backlog that we saw with some of the doses coming into the state because of those storms that hit a few weeks ago. With those increase in numbers, what is that rollout looking like? When can we start moving down in terms of age demographics, as well as other tiers of groups of people that will be getting these vaccines?
I'm very glad you asked that. So I had a conversation both yesterday and today with Director of Health, Libby Char, who I appreciate. And she has told me that we can look towards the 15th of March to go to the 70 to 74-year-olds. And then subsequently, once we get through that group, we will get to the 65 to 69-year-olds fairly quickly. I'll remind you that we only have 146,000 individuals statewide that are age 65 to 74. So we'll aggressively move through those numbers. I know it can't come soon enough for people, but now it's pretty soon. And the good news has been we've seen a real drop in our hospital numbers over the last 2 months because of the effect of vaccinating our kupuna. If people reflect on that, we had 110 people in the hospital as of January 8th after the surge. 84 people in the hospital on January 1, then 110 people in the hospital on January 8th, and now we're down to 31. And this is the effect of the vaccination for our kupuna. And to your question, Ryan, yes, we will get those 70 to 74-year-olds, I believe, started on just about March 15th. And so we'll begin to see some opportunity for signups in the coming week for that.
I want to bring in this question from Stephanie, who says, how does the Johnson & Johnson vaccine affect the state's vaccine rollout effort? So, the news over the weekend, of course, on Saturday is that they got their approval for that vaccine. You mentioned that we're getting 11,000 of those doses. Where do they go? In other words, do we get a choice, first of all, of which vaccine we get? And do the Johnson & Johnson vaccines go to different populations, or are they just mixed in with the others?
So a lot of important questions there. So first of all, in this first week, the Johnson & Johnson vaccines will be sent directly to the Department of Health, only because until we get a good cadence on when they're getting sent and how much, we're going to have them distributed by the Department of Health to our partners. That's number one. Two, people should decide and will decide which vaccine they want. We'll give them the opportunity to choose. That is always a person's choice. Three, Fauci said the other day on the news, he would take whatever shot was in front of him. And what he meant was the Johnson & Johnson is also very effective. It is 66 to 72% effective at preventing COVID, 72% in the US, 66% in Europe, but it has prevented over 85% of serious illness, and 100% so far of the individuals who took it survived. They did not have any cases that resulted in a fatality. So if you want just the one shot and you accept that amount of immunity, that would be good, and it's convenient. I would personally expect younger people to trend that way and to tend to want the Johnson & Johnson shot because they are in general at lower risk. So there's no hard and fast rule. But if you're under 50, you're overall healthy, in my opinion, Johnson & Johnson is a perfect shot for you. If you're 84 and for whatever reason you haven't gotten the vaccine yet, or let's say you're 71 and you're about to get it, I still would probably err on the side of getting the Pfizer or Moderna because it does take you all the way to 94.5% or better immunity. So those are the big picture overviews. Now, there's a lot to recommend either of them for different walks of life. Also, we're not going to discriminate against anybody. There had been this discussion of, well, maybe you save the Johnson & Johnson just for very migrant populations, like, for instance, individuals who are homeless. Well, we want to be fair to everyone. No one should have to take one vaccine over another because of their economic state. So people will decide. I will say, however, that if college students start getting vaccinated in the future, you can bet a lot of them are just going to want the one shot and done. Even my wife, Jamie said, she's 43 years old. She's inclined to just take the Johnson & Johnson when her turn comes because she's healthy, she's safe. She's not that worried if she were even to catch COVID. But the main thing for us as a family is she doesn't get very sick, and the Johnson & Johnson shot prevents that. So it's very likely that that Jane will take that shot.
We're going to bring in another question here from Ingrid Peterson, who's asking, are you concerned about the more contagious and more dangerous variants that have arrived, the UK, California, and even Brazil variants? We know that we're seeing these variants that are popping up in our own community here. What are your thoughts, and how will that impact the vaccine as well as the overall disease of as well as overall with COVID-19 in our community?
Well, Ingrid asked an awesome question. So I am worried about any of the variants that spread more rapidly. And that is a concern that we've had about some of our neighbor islands where there was a slight uptick in positivity rate. But I have not seen a lot of variants here yet. The California variant is the most likely variant to really be vibrant here. The variant that I was worried most about, we've not seen, which is the South African variant, because it was a little bit more resistant to the vaccines, and it was also more resistant to antibody treatment. We're going to get variants. That's what always happens with these viruses. They do mutate. The more people that have had the virus, and now we've documented over 114 million cases globally, the more variation that there will be. This all underscores the need to do two things: get vaccinated when our turn comes up and wear masks consistently until we reach herd immunity. Once our people are very immune across the state, it'll be extremely hard for any variant to catch hold. So we'll keep watching, and we'll keep testing people too well after we get vaccinated as a state, just to see if any of these outlier variants end up kind of popping up. But it's not a terrible concern. It's just something I'm mindful of right now. Most importantly, though, if people were wearing masks, they're not going to get any variant. And if people are vaccinated, also it appears they won't catch this virus.
We have some question from Jean, who says, can you explain more about when we will be able to sign up for the 70 to 74 age group vaccines? You mentioned it might be this week. I think it's actually in 2 weeks, but how do they register? I would assume it's the same as those who are over 75, but just for people who are new to the process, can you tell them once that number is called, how they can sign up?
Exactly. We'll make a big announcement specifically when we open that up for, say, age 70 to 74. And then people will go to hawaiicovid19.com and be able to sign up at the multiple venues. That's the main approach. Also, as we have, this is the state policy, the neighbor island vaccination centers will also be able to do it. So we'll just get that word out as much as possible. And you guys are actually one of the main places we make major announcements, honestly. So this is an important step. If it's the 15th of March, which I do believe it will be, for the vaccination process to go to age 70, then I think usually it's about a week before that we start putting out the sign-up availability. Could happen even sooner, but we'll make it publicly, that announcement, so that everyone has a fair shot to get signed in. The good news is we now simultaneously have more vaccine in state. At the same time, we're opening up a category which is a lot smaller. If you remember, 109,000 kupuna 75 and older were getting vaccinated, along with that other large group of frontline workers. This is just going to be probably about a third of the 146,000 people to get up next.
You know, we heard earlier, you mentioned those numbers from today, 29 cases reported in the state overall. I wanted to get your thoughts on those declining numbers. Do you believe that those numbers are direct results of the vaccination and its effects in the community, or is it also a result of people just being more vigilant about wearing masks and social gathering?
I think it's 50-50. There's no doubt we're seeing a vaccination effect now. We saw this in a lot of different countries, including Israel. When they first started vaccinating their people, they saw a very steep decline once they reached some kind of critical threshold. There's just a lot of immunity that you do get even from the first shot, and it makes it that much harder to spread the virus. But also, people continue to wear masks over 90%, at an over 90% rate, and that is a real godsend for our state. If we weren't as good with mask wearing, we would not see these numbers get this low. The average 7-day count now is 45.1. It's been really steadily declining. And of course, I mentioned the hospital numbers, but also the positivity rate's been dropping. So all of this is a reflection on the people of Hawaii. They have done an exceptionally good job. I don't know if I commented on this platform before about the numbers, but we probably should have had 5 times as many cases and 5 times as many fatalities based on a direct match for population to the mainland. But instead, because of mask wearing, social distancing, and now the immunization process going well, I think we're 7th in the country for efficiency. The numbers are just falling down.
Okay, I want to bring in Christine Donnelly. She's got a rather lengthy question, so I'm just going to sort of put it, summarize it. Basically, she's asking, what about availability of vaccines at places outside of the mass sites, Pier 2 and the Blaisdell? She's asking if perhaps the CVS locations can and will be bumped up. That, of course, is doing it through local pharmacies. But how do we make sure that people who can't necessarily drive or get to some of these big sites have the same access?
Great question. I think a couple things. One, yes, the CVS sites are going to continue to get more and more vaccine from the traditional Pfizer and Moderna platform. That's going to be valuable because the feds are ramping up their monthly supply every week. The numbers I gave you today about this 55,380 that are coming this week, that was sitting in the mid 40,000s just 3-4 weeks ago. So they're ramping up that, and a lot of that goes to the CVSs. Also, I do think that it's going to be a good place to use the Johnson & Johnson in pharmacies because they don't have to be refrigerated at extremely low temp, and it's only one shot. It's a lot more like the flu shot that we get, the Johnson & Johnson shot. And obviously, flu shots are usually done at the pharmacies. So it's going to likely be more accessible out in the community each month. And then come May, when we get to the broad population, I think you're going to mostly see the vaccines getting done in the community at community health centers and at pharmacies. I think the mass vaccination sites will be less prevalent as a percentage of the overall effort. So that's what I'm hoping. We will try to get you a better list. The feds control that program, sending directly to CVS. So it's a little bit out of our control at times.
I want to bring in a question from Sandy, bringing up a question. Can vaccinated Hawaii residents bypass quarantine for neighbor island travel? What do you think the process should be, or what does it look like the process being with neighbor island travel? We see these numbers going down on all of the islands, and maybe not even necessarily for vaccinated residents, but could we just see a lifting overall of the necessary testing that's required for those on Oahu heading towards a neighbor island?
Yes, at this rate, and we're discussing this actively day by day, at this rate, we should be able, with the permission of the mayors and the approval of the governor, be able to fully lift the quarantine requirements for travel inter-island, fully lift it. It shouldn't even be dependent on a test or vaccination because our rates are falling and are similar across the board. But the mayors have to approve that. As you know, Kauai has had very low case rates, and they may be a little bit more reluctant than others to have that broad an opening. But my recommendation, my personal recommendation, is we get to that point on or before April 1st, where we have no requirements for testing between the neighbor islands because we are safe and we vaccinated so many of our people and the rates are the same. And then we use, this was an extension of that question, we use the vaccine passport concept effective May 1st from the mainland. And we're working on that too. That's the best approach to open our state up. We did see data this last week or last 2 weeks since we last spoke, again, coming out of the Middle East, where they had a whole country, Israel in this case, vaccinated. They have seen, and their data is with Pfizer, that when people get vaccinated, their carrier rate or the rate at which you have any virus in your upper airways drops way, way, way down. You are immune, you can't catch COVID, but you also don't carry much COVID, and therefore it's safe to travel. So we will see that as the policy, both internationally and nationally. And I continue to want us to be a leader in this area because we, obviously have a lot on the line. So it is safe. I know that some people have suggested that I'm using us as a test case. That's not the case at all. We've seen this bear out with the data in other countries. I would not do anything that was unsafe, and we'll still watch the variants.
So let's get to the safe travels a little bit. Let's drill down a little bit more. The last time you were here, your hope was that by today, by March 1st, that CISA workers would be able to travel with that vaccine exemption. Obviously, that's not the case. Are you still hoping to do CISA and then Neighbor Island and then mainland, or are you just going for that May 1st for everyone now? Is that sort of the new benchmark?
Well, May 1st as the benchmark really should be for everyone. There's no reason not to at all. I am obviously a little bit more, I guess, aggressive than some other policymakers, just because I'm seeing the numbers decline and I'm seeing the risk decline. But a lot of the nation has gone very slow as far as changing these kind of rules. The CISA exemption has never been something that I've personally been particularly fond of, just because I think it's a little bit burdensome. And it turns out that we've gotten to such low numbers so quickly, probably per Ryan's earlier question, probably because the vaccines are kicking in, that it may not even be necessary to adjust that program before going completely to kind of an elimination of the requirements. Again, the mayors have to weigh in on that, but it is safe now. The only place where there's been a higher rate has been Maui, which the positivity rate's been about 4%. But take that with a grain of salt, because they're doing targeted testing in high-risk areas. And so that's always going to show a slightly higher positivity rate. They're doing a very good job as they work through this small surge they had the last 3 weeks. And again, they were down at 8 cases today, and I think yesterday was 15. So we should get rid of that as far as travel between the islands and open up our economic activity for our internal community. We'll still be safe with safe travels until the Gov feels super comfortable with a vaccination passport. But we have to move forward. And we know that we did the right things to keep people alive, but we also have to do the right things to keep our economy alive. And that's where I'm headed.
You know that big announcement happened last week with our school system, the DOE announcing that there will be allowing some form of in-person graduation, allowing students to have at least 2 representatives from their families involved in that come commencement season. What other changes do you think could be happening and coming for the Department of Education as we see these numbers decrease and these vaccination efforts increase? What other changes are you hoping to help to implement so that students can return to some sort of normalcy heading into the latter part of the school year?
So I think we'll be able to be fully open for the 4th quarter. Each school will have their variation of fully open. Sammy's school is going to be 2 days for each of the students, 2 days in person, full days, and they'll be alternating. So his group either Monday and Thursday or Tuesday and Friday, and then do some hybrid at home. But that's so much better than having no days in school. The 4th quarter will be salvaged for public schools, and that's what we got to see. We got a glimpse of that through Dr. Kemball's letter to all of us. I would give special kudos to Senator Schatz. He and I were working a lot on this with some others, and so it's pretty important that we get kids back into school because they've been suffering. But we will have the 4th quarter in person. It'll be not like your traditional regular 5-day a week for kids. That will come in the fall. But also this bodes well for summer schools. Summer schools should be able to be open per usual. That's also important. We're going to put our kids into some summer school classes to help them kind of catch up or fortify what 2021 looked like. It's really time to reflect on my family. Maya, my 14-year-old, has been in her private school for the whole year and been safe. And Sammy in the public school has had to be at home. And, that's just the way it played out for my family. And every family's a little bit different, but there's no reason the kids can't be there. And they're catching COVID at a lower rate when they're in school, by the way. We wanted to get our teachers vaccinated. That was the big thing. And not just the teachers, but all the workers, the people who are support staff and administrative staff and people who clean the schools, all super valuable people to us. They had to get vaccinated. And now that that's getting done, open them up.
Another area where a lot of people want to see reopening is the unemployment office. Last week, we saw about 200 people protesting at the rotunda at the state capitol. What's your view on doing any kind of in-person appointments? We had the director of the Department of Labor and Industrial Relations on here, and she said, frankly, it's not COVID that she's worried about. It's just the thousands, tens of thousands of people who have been waiting on benefits and who, frankly, are pretty angry about having to wait so long through no fault of her own. Obviously, the mainframe is very old, and she's just having a hard time getting those benefits out. So do you think that the unemployment office should open to in-person appointments, and if not, I mean, what other course of action do the people have?
At some point, it has to open for in-person appointments. I respect the director. She has to make that call. It's true that the COVID risk will subside by about May 1st. And after that point, there certainly is no risk for COVID spread, but you don't want 600 or 800 people standing in a line for several hours under any circumstance. It's a very tough situation because I respect those people who protested. They have had far too much hurt delivered to them over the course of this year. I mean, tens of thousands of people have navigated the system and have been able to get their benefits, but there are still that 10 to 12,000 people that have really struggled just because the application can be onerous and because it's pretty detailed. Everyone's circumstance is a little different. For instance, if you had received some unemployment benefits that just went slightly over what threshold you were supposed to get, the system kicked you out because, like you said, the system is old. And that's no fault of that person. So this has to be fixed. We have to put extra resources to fix these tech systems for sure. That's become quite obvious. We never expected to have a situation when we normally have this many people unemployed in Hawaii, now went to this many people because of COVID. So it's a lesson that we learned because of this crisis. I hope that she can open that up to in-person because there's nothing like an in-person encounter to fix a problem. But I'm going to have to defer to her. I never like to micromanage any of the departments, with the small exception of the Department of Health, where I'm a colleague and we work together a lot.
I want to bring in another question here from Roberta asking, is there a concern that the death rates remain the same, although positive cases decline? And is there an explanation for this? We know that Hawaii's cases on the death rate side have been down, but they have been pretty consistent. Can you speak to this question that came in from Roberta?
Sure. It'll take about 2 months to see the significant decline in death rates. Although I was commenting to my chief of staff just maybe 25 minutes ago that we seem to have seen a real flattening of the number of people dying. And that's a reflection of fewer people being in the hospital and being sick. So you'll see those numbers drop way off now that we have our elderly citizens vaccinated. Because the death rate for young people is small. I mean, really low. But it starts going up when people are 65 to 75, 75 to 85, and then the death rate's really high over 85 if you catch COVID. I had the opportunity to be out with my family for a family brunch this weekend, and a really nice young guy told me the story of his 61-year-old father who died, and he was worried about his mom catching COVID. So, I mean, young people can succumb to the virus too. So, our heart went out to him. It's really going to be a big drop off. The mortality rate is probably going to, when this whole thing is done, look like about 1 out of 200 people that caught COVID. It'll be a full reflection of the total number of cases that we'll eventually be able to count.
You mentioned that you went out to brunch this weekend, and I kind of want to ask you about navigating the new Tier 3 allowances, if you will. The CDC director has said that now is not the time on a national level to loosen restrictions. We still need to keep our guard up. We could see a fourth wave, so to speak. At the same time, here on Oahu, the numbers are good enough that we have gone to Tier 3. You mentioned that you went out to eat. How do we navigate what is permissible and what is not, and what is safe and what is not?
We do it based on the analytics. And so I was really happy that Mayor Blangiardi came in conservatively and waited a bit before made any moves. But the numbers did dictate that the safety was there. The positivity rate had been there for several weeks and the numbers had declined. Look, it was not much of a big brunch. We only went out for 6 of us, my aunt and uncle, and then my family and I. So that was Jamie, Maya, Sam, me, and then my uncle and aunt. We ourselves are not ready to do big events, of course. Even the 10 seems like sometimes a bigger number, but it was refreshing to see a restaurant and a small business be able to survive. And, we went over to Scratch, which is just an extraordinary little place here in Honolulu. And we were glad to see them. They were so happy to be getting their jobs back and to be serving people. And it was really safe. People were still wearing their masks when they weren't eating. People were in line very safely and distanced. So I think we learned a lot of lessons over the last many months. But even so, it's still fairly conservative. I mean, we're still not wide open, and our travel restrictions are pretty significant still. That, of course, I think will let up come May. But it's a good thing for people to have hope. It's a good thing for people to get back to some normalcy. And as long as people are wearing a mask, you're going to tend to not have much transmission. And then I'll remind you how fast we're going to get to the vaccine thresholds. We made our goal of 150,000 doses by February 1st, and we made our goal of 350,000 by March 1st. Given the news on Johnson & Johnson, we're going to reach 600,000 by April 1st quite easily, and then 900,000 by May 1st. We may even touch 1 million by then. So that's all built-in immunity. Irrespective of gathering, it'll be some immunity. But if people do get together, really remember, it only takes one person to set off a little infection. So wear those masks if you're around people of any kind, but especially until we're fully vaccinated.
And so to tag on to that question, what does that look like maybe in the fall, in the winter of later this year and going into next year, as we start to see the population here in the state get the vaccination? Could we see another booster shot that's going to be needed heading into the next year? What does the future of the vaccination program look like here in Hawaii?
It looks like a booster a year out in all likelihood. It also looks like we will reach herd immunity sometime in the summer, probably before Labor Day, like I've been saying, between July 4th and Labor Day. But now it's going to tend to be sooner because of this extra large number of vaccinations. We will get 300,000 Johnson & Johnson shots by the time the summer ends. And that's just a lot of extra people getting vaccinated. So we'll probably have herd immunity by the time you mentioned, Ryan. And that means not that everyone's protected, but that we won't get outbreaks. And anyone who got the shot will be virtually immune. So things will look really normal. We'll probably begin to change the regulation and the recommendations for outdoor mask wearing first. That would be most likely. And we'll still tell people to be cautious when they're in close quarters with groups. But the vaccination passport will allow us to have bigger gatherings. The concept of having travel to Hawaii where people have been vaccinated will mean there's very low risk. It's already been low. We've had so few cases from travelers, I can't even tell you. So you're going to start feeling like it's normal in the fall. But it was great not to have flu. It's great not to have colds. It will certainly be great not to have a resurgence of COVID. So all these things are going to be relevant. And then you're going to be talking about, little hotspots across the globe. Because remember, much of the international community will not do what we're able to do. They will not be able to vaccinate their country quickly. They're going to be doing this well into 2022.
Okay, our time is wrapping up, but we'd love to get some closing thoughts from you. And again, a lot of people are asking about the timetable. So if you could just reemphasize one more time when we think the 70-year-olds and then when we think 65 and up might get their shot.
Sure. So it's gone well. 356,843 shots are in arms. We're going to have a surplus of shots coming in the next couple of weeks. So we'll be able to expand. I believe that we will start the 70 to 74-year-olds on the 15th of March. So we'll get some signups out there a few days before that. That should take 2 to 3 weeks. So sometime shortly thereafter, we'll be able to do the 65 to 69-year-olds. We will also be really aggressively vaccinating individuals with lung disease, with oxygen requirements, with cancer, and on dialysis. That's the next top priority. When we get through this group of 65 to 74-year-olds and those individuals, then it starts opening up much more broadly in April, and you will see us get to immunity very quickly through the summer.
All right, Lieutenant Governor Josh Green, thank you so much for spending your morning here with us and kicking off the week by providing those numbers. We really appreciate it.
You bet. Hey, thanks, everybody.
Aloha.
Thank you so much. Wow. Well, I love that timetable that he laid out because it feels so within reach, Ryan, to just hear about that we are starting just in about 2 weeks to open to people who are over 70. And then just a few weeks after that, expecting that the 65 plus will be able to get their shot and then lowering it down to the next tier. That feels very hopeful. He again reiterated that he's hoping for a vaccine passport allowance for transcontinental travel starting May 1st. So we will see that that's the goal they are working to. And he does want to eliminate the neighbor island restrictions for the testing that you had asked him about.
Yeah, and we're already seeing how the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is impacting the state and the overall numbers with what they're going to be able to do. We also talked about a choice of vaccination. The lieutenant governor saying that people should have that option of deciding what vaccine they want. Currently, right now, that is not available just because of the rollout, but soon he believes that people should be able to request specifically which vaccine they would like to receive. And so we'll wait to see and get more information from the Department of Health on when that will be allowed within those vaccination centers. But good news with all the number of vaccines that are arriving here. Again, he also reported 29 cases here in the state going to be reported for today, and the positivity rate also at 1.19% for the state overall. So those numbers, again, continuing to go on the decline.
And we know a lot of you, I see some questions here about kids, and we talked a little bit about school reopenings. We're going to be diving more deeply into that on Wednesday. We have the Department of Education Superintendent, Dr. Christina Kishimoto. She's going to be joining us. We did talk about graduation allowances with the Lieutenant Governor, so she'll be expanding on that. And then summer school and the fall. I know a lot of kids are eager, and their parents are eager to get them back into the classroom. So what is that going to look like? We had Senator Brian Schatz on here. He said he wanted in-person learning back after spring break, which is coming up. So we'll be talking to Dr. Kishimoto about that.
And we know that there are a lot of teachers out there as well that have a lot of questions about what that exactly looks like. When we spoke to Senator Schatz, he says one of the biggest things is the logistical side of putting this all back together, thinking about how they are going to create what the new system looks like for those that want to continue with distance and virtual learning and those who want to get their kids back into the school. And so we're going to be detailing and trying to get more information from Dr. Kishimoto on what that exactly looks like as we head on to the latter part of this academic school year.
Yeah, and then on Friday, we're doing a citizens taking the reins for themselves show, so to speak. We've talked a lot about unemployment on this program. We're going to be talking with two moderators of the Hawaii Unemployment Facebook group. They've got over 26,000 members. Those are a lot of people who are frustrated by the process. We've invited those moderators to join us to talk about, some of the issues that they're seeing. And then in the second half of the show, we've invited Angela Keene to come back on. She's part of the the Quarantine Kapu Breakers group there.
Yeah, we want to hear more, again, an update on what that looks like, if they've been continuing to see many people breaking the COVID laws. We know that they were a busy and active group early on in this pandemic, but how things have changed now that we're seeing those numbers now. Do they continue to see those kapu breakers, as they like to call themselves? Are those numbers also continue to rise? So looking forward to another week of great conversations, and thank all of you for being a part of it. We know that the Lieutenant Governor always gets a lot of questions and comments, and we really appreciate him coming on board and taking on those vaccination questions. We encourage you to come back here on Wednesday when we talk to Dr. Christina Kishimoto at 10:30. Until then, stay safe, and we'll see you on Wednesday. Aloha.
Aloha.